Hi everyone, Assalamu alaikum, namaste, Sat Sri Akal. My name is Farheen Khan and you're watching the AZEEZA show. And today we're going to talk about new beginnings. A lot of the women on our show or after our shows online have been reaching out and talking about some of their stories and looking for some sound advice. So who better to talk to than our dear friend Samra Zafar. Samra, welcome back to the show.
Thank you so much for having me again, Farheen.
Pleasure. So Samra, you had this amazing article come out in the Toronto Life and magazine, and since then I've just been watching you travel here and there and tell your story. Tell us how it's been going.
It's insane in a very good way.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I'm on a roller coaster of excitement and thrill and also emotion.
Right.
So it's been a tremendous journey, and the speaking and everything, and the platforms that I'm sharing my message on have increased tremendously. And it just allows me to do what I do and feel great about doing it. And yes, the traveling and all of that is amazing, but the real reason why I do it is because you get to actually touch people's lives, and those messages and notes that I get almost every day about women writing to me or men telling me how it's I've inspired them to be better fathers or better husbands or better sons, or it's really that's what keeps me going.
That's amazing. That's really great. So what? So can you tell us? So this particular, you have a book coming out as well.
Yes.
So how is tell us about that.
Yeah, it's coming out in March.
Okay, amazing.
And we're just kind of going through the final editing stages and figuring out the title and cover and all of those things, and the manuscript is pretty much complete. It took about a year to write it, and I had a co-writer to work with, but it was still quite an emotionally gut-wrenching process.
Oh, yes. I hear you on that.
I'll never forget the hours and hours I've spent on her couch just sobbing like a baby. And it was kind of like, when I would read stuff and I would go through the manuscript to sort of proofread and edit and whatnot, I would oh my God, I feel so sorry for this poor girl, and then I would realize that was me. And that was quite difficult, but also very rewarding at the same time, very cathartic to know that, okay, now my experiences now have the power to touch people's lives in a positive way.
Right.
So it's been tremendous, and watch out, is coming out International Women's Day 2019.
Amazing.
And I'm super excited.
Very exciting. I know. I remember when I wrote my book as well. It was just that feeling of I remember not being able to actually edit it myself. My best friend Sanjita, this girl who I went to school with, I remember calling her up and being listen, I need to edit my my book. Can you sit in the Tim Hortons with me? And she'd be like, yeah, okay, cool. So she'd bring her work and she'd be doing whatever, and I'd be sitting there editing, and then I'd look up at her every so often just to ground myself again, to be like, okay, this is really intense. I just need somebody, and then I'd continue, right? And I remember when I actually got the physical book in my hand, it was I can't even explain. I don't have words to explain. It was terrifying at one moment, right? Because I was wow, this my PTSD was oh my God, here it is, all of this stuff that I've dealt with in this book. But at the same time, I was excited because I was I felt there was this relief that I had, right? This burden had just lifted off. I'm wow, I'm finally done with this chapter of my life, and I can actually remove myself.
And you are actually in a position to be able to talk about it.
Exactly.
And that is very empowering, especially when you see that it, whatever trials and adversity and whatnot that you went through, you were never alone in it.
Right.
There are so many people out there who can benefit from it. So
exactly.
Using that as a positive force of good, it's quite liberating and very rewarding.
That's amazing. I'm just excited to see how, I need to know what you feel like when you get that book in your hand.
Oh, trust, I will invite all of my friends,
yes,
including you, and then that's when, okay guys, we're actually going to get the first copy.
Amazing.
Hold me.
Right? Seriously, wow. So one of the other things I want to talk to you about, because I think is really important for our viewers, Samra, is like, you know, you talk about like, you know, the show, this particular episode is all about new beginnings, right?
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, one of the big parts of your story, which, you know, I'll let you share, is kind of that whole, you know, starting over.
Mm-hmm.
So can you maybe share a little bit about like what your experience was and why that actually has meaning to you?
Absolutely, yeah. You know, you don't think of it that way though, at that point. You don't think of it as a new beginning. That comes in hindsight.
Right.
At that time, it feels like your world is crashing down and ending and burning up in flames.
Yeah.
You know, it almost feels like you're jumping off of a parachute. You're jumping off of a plane without a parachute. And you just kind of hope to God that you somehow survive. and land on soft ground somewhere, or like fall in water and learn how to swim and whatnot. And
oh my God.
It is really terrifying. And you know, it's definitely overwhelming when it comes to, you know, like lack of finances or knowledge or education. I mean, I had all those going against me because I hadn't ever had a job and I didn't have an education that I could, you know, sort of hang my hat on. But the biggest fear of all of those is the fear of isolation and rejection. Because as human beings, we all want to be seen and accepted for who we are. Whether it's, you know, at our workplace, whether it's our you know, school or life or family.
For sure.
You know, I heard this speech by Oprah a few weeks ago where she says that, you know, she's interviewed everyone from Obama to, you know, like all kinds of celebrities and Beyonce and all her Beyonce-ness. And every time when the camera stops, everybody asks, was I okay? Was that okay? You know, it's our internal need as a human being,
right,
to feel that we are seen and we are enough. Are we enough?
Right.
You know, am I okay the way I am?
Exactly.
Are people going to accept me or reject me? So, you know, but when you're going through trauma and when you're coming out of something like that, that fear is elevated to an extent where you just you know, feel really low in confidence because of the years of abuse. You have been told all your life that you can never make it on your own, and you start believing it.
Right.
Your sense of self-worth is absolutely rock bottom. And then you're like, well, if I'm this horrible, why would anyone talk to me? How can I reach out for help?
Right.
People will see through it and they will see what kind of a horrible, worthless creature I am, and then they will not be my friend. And it is, and oftentimes, sadly, in certain cultures and societies and families and communities, that actually does happen. I faced my share of backlash from, you know, my family and the people that I knew and who all shunned me because how dare a woman speak up, you know? Oh, she must have been sleeping around and ran away with someone, or that's why her husband left her. And like it, you know, it was all somehow my fault.
Right.
Just because I was trying to defy the norms and build a better life. So that all of that can get so overwhelming.
For sure.
That you feel like there's no way I can do it. I just want to go back.
Right.
But what I have learned in my life is you just keep putting one step in front of the other. Take it one more day. And I promise you that people will lend you their parachute. People will hold your hand. You know, there will be a big, huge sort of crowd gathered with a net where you can kind of fall on it.
Yes.
Because there is far greater good in this world than there is bad. In fact, I always say that positivity is just, negativity is just a drop in an ocean of positivity.
Right.
Because what unites us is ultimately so much more powerful than what divides us.
Yes.
And people will see you as a human being who's struggling to build a better life, and they will lend you a helping hand.
For sure.
So it's just about having that courage to take that first step and just keep going.
Right.
So I always say, like, break it down into like not this humongous mountain that you have to climb, but just like take the next step, next step, next step, and you'll look back and you'll be like, whoa, I feel so proud of myself. I can't believe I did this.
Right?
Yeah.
Amazing. So what, I was trying to think, a couple things that you talked about, right? Like just this notion of like how people would look at you or how you would, I mean, were there moments during your process or your, you know, your relationship where you were thinking of leaving and you were told not to, or that to be patient and stuff like that? What was your...
Many times. You know, I think when I finally left, it was the 5th time.
Okay.
And there were different sort of episodes. Like once I had left to visit my family back in Pakistan and didn't want to come back. And then the next time I left, my father died, so I was sent back. Then there were a couple times here that, you know, I tried to leave, but then I would think like, no, but, you know, where will I go and who will ask for help? No one will talk to me. How will I survive? You know, all those overwhelming fears.
For sure.
And then people telling me that it's a woman's job to stay quiet for the sake of the family, and a good wife is, you know, she tolerates.
Right, she's obedient
and subservient, and you know. So of course I wanted to be a good wife.
Right.
I wanted to be accepted, because that's, you know, ultimately our need as human beings.
For sure.
And I tried to fit into that mold, and it was just suffocating. So yes, it happened many times. In fact, even after I had actually finally left, there was a time when I almost went back because of the backlash.
Yeah, let's talk about that. So what actually happened? Like, what was it that made you go back or think about going back?
It was, so first of all, that whole sort of, my family hates me, my community hates me, people look at me weird. I was getting a lot of unwanted sexual attention from men who thought, because now I'm single and, you know, I'm living alone and with no meal or whatever, I'm fair game.
Goods, so it's fine.
Yeah, I'm damaged goods, I'm used property, so I'm fair game. In fact, one of our sort of my ex-husband's family friends, she called me and she's like, oh, I heard you were sleeping around with someone and you ran away with him. Is that true? All that stuff happened. And then, you know, a lot of times people's comments made me feel like I'm somehow incomplete because my marriage is broken. I got a marriage proposal, or I was presented with a marriage proposal of a 60-year-old man with grown kids whose kids were older than I was. And I was told, oh, this is the best you can do now because you're divorced and you have two kids. Do you think you'll find someone closer to your age? And I was 29 at that time.
That's ridiculous.
You know, so it was, so all that made me feel like there's something wrong with me, that I will never be respected because I'm somehow damaged. And you know, that is this what my entire life is going to look like? Am I always going to be shamed like this? So one day, as I was feeling super overwhelmed, I actually went back and I begged him to take me back.
Wow. Okay, just on that thought, we're going to take a quick break and I want to talk to you about that. Okay, we'll be back after this. Hi everyone, you're watching the AZEEZA show, and we're talking about New Beginnings. I was just talking to Samra. So Samra, you were telling us that you actually went back and you begged him to take you back.
I did.
Okay.
And he said, I'll think about it.
Oh my God.
And I got into my car and I was driving back home, and I just wanted to end my life. I actually wanted to like topple my car over a bridge and just sort of die, because I felt so worthless. That, oh my gosh, what did I do after all these months of struggling and, you know, making little bits of progress? I let it all go to waste, and I just demeaned myself, and my kids deserve a better mother than this. They don't need someone like me, and it was horrible. Luckily, again, like I said, you know, people will lend you their parachutes, and that sort of, that rock bottom became the foundation for me to go nowhere but up. And after that is when I realized that I can't let this get to me. I need to move forward. I need to, you know, study and do better. And so that's when I just threw myself into my education, and I kind of put blinders on, that's all I'm going to focus on. Block out all that noise, stop talking to people like that, separated myself from, you know, from those kinds of communities, and just built my network and support system at the university, and it eventually paid off.
That's amazing. So I want to ask you, I mean, I remember when our stories are very different, right? Because mine was more immigration fraud, unfortunately. But there was still that emotional connection and having to leave, right? And actually making that decision to cut it off. I remember also doubting as well. And like, I remember he used to work for this, car rental thing where they would show up to accidents and pass off, rental cars to people. And I remember distinctly, like one time driving on the highway and just standing there, I'm like, okay, what if I swerve my car and I hit, and I get into an accident? Maybe by chance he'll be the one who shows up, right? And I can have a conversation with him and he'll realize, like that, he doesn't actually just want the immigration. He actually wants to be with me, you know? And it was just,
you're in denial.
In hindsight now, I'm thinking like, wow, like I can't believe I even thought that, right? But it was so real at the moment. It was just, it's so, it's so unfortunate that we doubt ourselves so much when I knew I made the right decision. I knew I was like already on a particular path. I just needed to kind of, step back and look at it. But the question I also want to talk about is the fact that like, you made that decision. So making the decision in and of itself is a really big deal, right? It's very difficult to do. And I know in my little, way I had to make that decision for myself. But you had family, you lived with this individual, you had kids, and what was it that really got you to that point where you finally decided this is it, and how did you make that decision?
It was my girls. And when I had started to go for counseling, because I started my university about 2 years before I left him.
Okay, so you were at home before that?
So for 10 years I was at home.
You had very little family here?
Sorry?
You had a little family here?
I have no family here.
Okay, so
no family at all.
Okay.
So I was just in home living with my husband and my in-laws for 10 years. And I started university after 10 years of marriage, and I was still married at that time. I had my 2 kids. And I started going for counseling and learning that it was not my fault. I deserved better. I could do better. There are options. What is happening to me has nothing to do with me. It's just about his obsessive need to control and feel good, by exerting unfair power. So all of those things helped me realize that it's not me. And and as I was sort of, thinking that I'll finish my undergrad, I'll get a job, and then I will leave. But when I started to learn about the generational cycle of abuse, that kids who grow up watching abuse in their families will accept it, will normalize it. They will either become abusers or they will become abused. And, I have 2 girls, and I wouldn't wish what happened to me on my worst enemy, let alone my daughters. So I just told myself, if it's not for me, I need to do it for them. And I saw what it was doing to them. I saw that my older daughter would not have confidence to speak up in class or make friends at school or answer questions or raise her hand. And she was always sad. Like sometimes at recess, she would put her head down and cry because she saw me do that at home. And my younger one was also witnessing some of it. And she was only 3 once when, there was a violent episode happening, and she locked herself in the closet and started to pray to Allah that Allah please save my mommy. So that just broke my heart, and I'm like, I don't want them to think that this is how women should be treated.
Absolutely.
And I don't want them to take it and I can tell them until I'm blue in the face that you need to be strong and this is not acceptable, but they won't believe me unless I show them that.
That's right.
So that was the factor that kind of pushed me over that hurdle and over, I say, the edge of the plane.
And then, wow, that's just, it's just remarkable. And how did you, so you took that leap, then what happened?
Well, I moved. I mean, there was a few legal stuff in there that that was just an ugly time. But ultimately, I moved to UTM campus housing. So I was a student at University of Toronto, Mississauga. So that's where I moved and got a little apartment and rented out one of my bedrooms to a Pakistani girl. And I said, when I'm at work and in class or in court, whatever, just watch my children for me, because they were quite young. And because I was living on campus and I picked up a few on-campus jobs and my classes were on campus, everything was like within a 2-minute walk of each other.
Right.
And then my kids got familiarized with campus. They would be roaming around like they own the place. And we built a new life there. And, you know, my little apartment was often termed the new Union Station of UTM because everybody would come and crash there if they had an exam the next morning, or you know, they'd be sneaking around in my kitchen looking for biryani.
Awesome.
And I started selling some home cooked food to students on campus. That helped me sort of make ends meet with my grocery bills, and just sort of found ways to take it one more day, one more step. And every day I felt like I'm doing something wrong and I should just give up and throw in the towel, and you know, what am I doing? Am I crazy for thinking I'm actually going to do something with my life? But then I would walk in the door and, you know, my kids would come running to me and give me hugs, and I was like, yep, I got to do it. I can do it for them.
For them, yeah.
And, you know, when I look back, I think, and even I practice this now as well, that you got to be your own best friend. You got to be your own biggest cheerleader, because sometimes there will be times in life when there will be no one. I'm very lucky to have people in my life who are, like I call them, my personal cheerleading squad, and you know, you're one of them, and I'm there for you in the same way.
Sure, for sure.
Who will love me and believe in me and support me unconditionally. But that's happened after I started, you know, after I already took that leap.
Exactly.
You know, when I took that leap, there was no one.
Right.
I didn't even know if there will be people like that, because my view of the world was so jaded from what I'd seen in my family and then in his. So at that time, I was the one who was doing that for me. So I would often stand in front of a mirror in my bathroom and kind of practice my acceptance speech of when I would be getting my degree. Or I would talk to myself while driving, and you know, I would like, yeah, this is gonna happen, like I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna get an A on this test, and I would visualize, and alhamdulillah, like a lot of that came true. And so it's, maybe there's something to it, right? I do that now too. I think my book is going to be a bestseller. For sure.
For sure. That's very cool.
So you have to believe in yourself, and it's a conscious decision. It's an evolutionary kind of a process. It doesn't happen overnight. There will be times when you'll fall, you'll fail, you'll be so hard on yourself. I went through that a few weeks ago. I you know, something happened in my personal life, just like completely shook me up and like threw me off balance. But I was like, yeah, I've gotten through worse, and I'm going to get through this too. And it's okay to feel sad. It's okay to be down on yourself, but then you pick yourself up. And you brush that dust off and you move on.
Move on, for sure. And what advice would you give women that, you know, are thinking about it? Because there are some that are, you know, thinking.
The biggest thing I would say is taking care of yourself and standing up for yourself does not mean that you're selfish. It means that you love yourself. And there's a big difference between self-love and being selfish. And I think as women, we confuse the two a lot. And I did too in my life a lot. And as a mother, I still do sometimes, you know, like if I want to do something for myself, am I being selfish instead of buying something for my children, right? Mom guilt and all of that is real. So, and you know, when you're in a marriage or in any situation, and you think that, you know it's not good for you, you're not happy, you're not being treated right, whether it's at your workplace where it's a toxic work environment or whatever it may be, you are you feel that way, but then you're also sort of self-doubting yourself, and you're like, no, but if I leave, that's really selfish. Or maybe love is sacrificing myself, or yeah, he said something so disrespectful and I felt bad about it, but he buys me gifts and trips, so maybe I should let it go. And the one lesson that I think I have learned in life so far, and I'm still evolving, is that no one can treat you or has the right to treat you like an inferior person. And no one has the power to do it unless you give it to them. So you gotta own your power, and you gotta realize that you cannot be loving and kind to other people without first being loving and kind to yourself.
Right.
Be your best friend. I often use the trick that, you know, if I'm in this situation, what advice would I give to my daughter if she were in this situation?
Right.
And you want the best for your children, right?
For sure.
You don't want them to be unhappy, you don't want them to cry, you don't want them to be disrespected. Or let's say if you don't have children, think about your best friend or someone that you really support and love unconditionally.
For sure.
What would you say to them? Say that to yourself.
Yes.
And we as women often don't do that because we think love is all about tolerance and sabr and patience and sacrifice. No, love is about being self-loving, and that allows you to be loving to other people in a much healthier way. Because ultimately your foundation with your relationship with you is the best foundation for your relationship with other people. I love my children to pieces, but I love myself first.
Right.
And that allows me to love my children more.
Yes.
In a healthy way.
Yes.
You know, and it makes me a better mother because when I'm happy, I can be happy with them and for them.
Yes.
And you know, our relationship has improved tremendously. I'm a very busy person. I'm very ambitious. I don't have, you know, all the time in the world to spend with them. I don't put dinner on the table every night. Like, we have takeout most nights a week, and all of those. But that doesn't matter.
Right.
You know, we share a bond that is so precious, and we know that we've always got each other's back.
Right.
And that is what real love is about.
For sure.
And you got to have your own back.
Well, thank you so much, Tamara, for being on the show.
Thank you
for all your advice. Honestly, that was amazing.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
All right, everyone. So this is all about new beginnings, and definitely, you know, we need to start putting ourselves first. So think about, you know, what we've heard, what we've shared, and until next time, we'll see you next week. Take care.